Okay. All right, so welcome again. Deschooling. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about deschooling is that, of course, it comes up all the time. And I like to talk about it in a broader way than I often see it being discussed. And that was my main motivation for putting it as one of our cafe topics. So I want to start just by saying how we usually define it, and then I'm going to kind of expand from there. So basically, we talk about deschooling as being that kind of period of time when you're stepping aside from school, letting go of the school routine, the school ways of thinking, school habits, school expectations, and trying to find your way back to yourself in order to start learning, living, education in a way that is motivated by yourself rather than by external forces. So that's kind of how I define it. You know, different people will define it slightly differently, but that's the basic idea. It's most often talked about in the context of leaving school and going to homeschooling. However, I think that it's far broader than that. I would say that sometimes people are homeschooling simply when they've decided that they're going to look at a different way of being at school, that they might, rather than having school as being the be all end all and the most important thing, they might just give school a little bit of a less prominent place in their lives, so that school is there, they're still going, but instead of it being the main focus, it's a secondary focus. So to me, that even that is kind of a process of deschooling, because we're talking about different ways of engaging with education. So I also find that we often think about deschooling as being connected to the kids that are actually going through that process, the kids that have left a school system and are moving into learning on their own terms more. But in fact, I would say that it's the parents and the other adults in that child's life who are doing more of a deschooling process than the kids themselves. And you know, those of you I know looking around the room, I know that some of you already know this from personal experience, that you know, they often say kids have no trouble deschooling or, you know, running their own education. Kids, like, let them go. They've got so much that they want to do. It's the adults, the parents, who have this like, I have to make sure they're learning. I have to make sure they're going to be successful, make sure they're meeting the requirements of the ministry, for those of you who are in Quebec. So there's lots of things that we as parents have to overcome in order to support our kids in a homeschooling, in a route that allows them to take control of their own education. So that mindset shift is huge. And I also want to note that it's not just us as parents, it's also grandparents. It's the next door neighbor. It's the principal at the school that you're leaving. It's the person in the grocery store who says, oh, PD day today, when you go in. It's all those moments of people coming into your sphere who think that all children should be in school, or at the very least homeschooling in a very, very academic way. And so to me, this whole idea of deschooling is, let's just open things up so that we can adjust our ways of thinking about living, learning, education to be more coming from the inside out rather than the outside in. So that's kind of some of my ideas around the concept of deschooling. And what, of course, we wind up talking about, you know, those of you who've had sessions with me or people, you know, how it often goes is, but what is it supposed to look like? You know, if my child is deschooling, all they want to do is play video games all day. All they want to do is be in their room all day. Even all they want to do is read books all day. It's the all they want to do is blank that can be really hard. And part of why it's hard is we often see our kids in their rooms not connecting with anybody in the family or their friends. We have a real fear around, what are they doing? Are they okay? Are they becoming depressed? Are they becoming isolated? What should we be doing to help with all of that? If they're younger, sometimes it's a feeling of, am I supposed to entertain them all day now? Like, is that now my role, to keep them occupied all day? I can't do it. I'm going to pull my hair out. So it's really this question of, what does it look like to implement this notion of deschooling? What do you do when you get up in the morning, when school isn't there to structure your day for you? So to me, there's a couple of parts to that. A lot of it comes from what's going on for your child when you step into this process of deschooling. Is your child bursting with ideas and desires to go and do art all day or forging all day because that's something that they just love to do and they never have time to do it? If that's the case, awesome. Now they have time to do it. And it might be as simple as that. And if your child or teen is somebody that isn't really sure, then that whole deschooling thing can feel really hard, and you can feel a bit lost because you don't know what to do with your days. It's kind of like, as adults, we'll often joke about retirement, and if you'll hear people saying, oh, well, when my husband retires, it's going to be awful because he won't know what to do. He's just going to sit around at the house all day. He won't know what to do. So we as adults can relate to that idea of, if you suddenly have nothing to do, sometimes you just get blocked and you don't know what to do. And that's a very frequent experience for people who are leaving school. I just don't know what to do. And then, of course, this is the easiest thing to do. So we get stuck on there. So as parents or as teens in that situation, I think it's really important to look at the mental health and to moderate those expectations. People will often say, oh, deschooling is like, you want to just give as much time as possible to go and explore things. But sometimes I'm finding more and more that it might be necessary just to say, this is a process. And maybe rather than letting everything go at first, we're actually going to keep a couple of familiar things in our lives. So interestingly, in Quebec, there's a lot of expectations of homeschoolers, a lot of requirements. They have to report to the ministry that they've done a certain amount of academics. In some ways, that obligation actually helps with the process of deschooling for some families. Because rather than saying, okay, it's wide open, you can do whatever you want, it might be, yes, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to have to spend like a morning a week doing a bit of math and history in order to meet the requirement. And then that morning has the function of kind of anchoring the week a little bit. Because we're human, we need routines. We need to go to bed and wake up and eat. And those things that we do during the day are really important parts of our well-being. So you might wind up deciding, yeah, we're deschooling. We're trying to find our way forward. And for now, maybe there's going to be a couple of things that still happen that might not always happen, but they happen because it's our way of staying well balanced as a family. So that's just an idea that I wanted to bring into this conversation. It's sort of the idea of like scaffolding. Instead of saying like you go from here to here, sometimes it takes steps to get there, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not deschooling right or anything like that. It just means you're listening to what your needs are as a family. Speaking of needs as a family, deschooling, if it truly looks like, okay, you were at school, you're no longer at school, you're home all day, the week is open, what does that do to the needs of the family? If a parent still needs to work and the child is saying, okay, but play with me all the time, how do you balance that? And it's amazing the really cool ways that you can balance that. Sometimes it becomes grandparents, spending regular time with grandparents. Or it might be hiring a teenager who's a homeschooler to come and hang out with your kids for a couple of afternoons or mornings. It might be finding a forest school that has a program, or finding a neighbor who loves to do something that your child likes to do, and they'd be happy to have your child's company a couple of hours, a couple of times a week, doing whatever that something is. There's all kinds of ways of connecting with other people that we don't normally do in our societies anymore, because we're so used to kind of living in our own worlds. Our neighbors are there, our grandparents are there, but that idea of having a life that's truly interlinked with another family's or another person's life is a bit of an odd idea right now. But it's the kind of thing that can really give some important anchor points in the week that also gives the parent time to themselves, to do yoga, take a nap, or if you can create more time to work. So it's something, a really important thing to put in there as well. I think another reason that things can feel hard during a deschooling process is the sense of, for a child or for a teen, if they're seeing all of their friends at school and they're thinking, oh, like, you know, they have to go to school, they have homework, they have exams, they have essays. Like, why should I not have to do that? That just feels weird. Like they've got all this obligation and this sense of stress, and I don't have any of that. It can actually wind up creating distance between people who've been friends for years because it's such a different way of being. And the child can, or the teen who's not in school, can start feeling badly that they're being lazy or they're not working hard like their peers are. It can start reflecting negatively on their sense of self. And that's a really interesting one. Sometimes it's a question of helping them to understand the true value of what they're doing. So for example, say they're really interested in environment and they're like going through, I don't know, all of Greta Thunberg's videos and watching them and just like spending tons of time online doing that. And they're thinking that they're just kind of not doing anything useful. Helping them to see that there's something they're interested in. They're definitely learning about environment. They're learning about, you know, how she's presenting herself in the world and all the different ways that that can be done. And sometimes it's just helping them to see what they're doing as being valuable and how it will eventually help them if they decide to go to university or they decide to start a business. Helping them to see the value in what they're instinctively doing can make a really huge difference. It's also important for people who are stepping outside of this usual system way of doing things to have words to explain what they're doing. If you're 16 and you stopped going to school, people think you're a dropout because that's the only word we have for that. And dropout, of course, is a very negative connotation. So it can be really, really helpful just to say, well, there's words like self-directed learning. There's words like unschooling, homeschooling. What are the words? What's the label that you're going to feel comfortable sharing? So that every time somebody says to you, oh, PD day today, or you're not at school, so that you have a sentence that feels solid to you. So you can come away from those conversations feeling positive rather than feeling uncomfortable. Two more thoughts about the idea of the doing nothing or the video games. One is patience. When you ask people about deschooling, you'll often hear the idea that it takes a month of deschooling for every year that you've been in school to kind of adjust and find your way again. But that's just for the kids and the teens. As adults who are involved in this, think how many years you've been in school and how many years you've been thinking that school is the only way. So that's a lot of deschooling. It can take a really long time to think differently about it. And the last thought on that is that in addition to letting that whole kind of deschooling process happen, there's also just fostering the experiences that they're enjoying. It might not be an obviously academic thing. There's one teen I work with who loves to travel, and she's been able to go along with her mom on a lot of her mom's business trips. And there's no like obvious academic reason for it or anything like that. But building that travel experience in parallel to her kind of deschooling process is bringing her confidence in all kinds of ways that you wouldn't normally have anticipated it. So it's not always obvious, but taking something that feels good and in which the person, the child, the teen is thriving, and just building on that and patiently waiting to see where that takes everybody can be an amazing way forward. So most of what I've said so far has been in the context of deschooling that's heading to homeschooling or self-directed learning or something like that. And most of what I said could be understood in the context of somebody who needs to reframe their connection with school, their way of being at school. And the reason I want to bring that forward as well is because, to me, the most important thing is that we bring it back to ourselves. And once we know why we had, what we were walking away from, what wasn't working for us, was school causing trauma or stress, or was it too much school was just too much? What is it that you're needing not to be doing? Coming back to, okay, I'm getting clear on that, and then you see where you're going from there. So it might be that you have somebody who takes a month away from school. There's no plan in that family to ever homeschool for whatever reason. But just taking that month away to kind of breathe and explore with the school what some different options might be. This is the whole unschooling school idea, is can you be at school more on your own terms? What does it look like if you go to school only part-time? Is that possible? What does it look like if you get to choose your teachers instead of being with the teachers that you just get given? What does it look like if, say you're a high schooler, the school makes a commitment to have one of your friends in every one of your classes instead of random selection of classes? Is that enough to change your school experience? So to me, deschooling is part of saying, okay, I'm not just a student being moved around the chessboard of school logistics. I'm me, and this is my child if we're talking to parents. And so with that child's experience front and center, are there ways that we can just change their school experience that will make things easier for them? Not even just make things easier, make things so that their school experience is supporting their well-being, so that it makes sense for them as a tool for their growth. What I wanted to leave you with before I stop blabbing and take a look at all of these comments that are being made is, where's it gone? I'm going to share my screen. Blake Bowles is somebody who's done a lot of work in the area of unschooling, self-directed learning. And I just saw recently that he posted I think he called it an essay, but it's kind of set up like a poem that he wrote back in April. And it's the idea of you don't have to go to work, also being able to be read as you don't have to go to school. I highly recommend it. I'm going to put the link in the chat in just a moment. He just spells it out really clearly about this idea of what do we have to do. He talks about you must find meaning, purpose, belonging, you must feel useful and be of genuine use. Things like this. These are the types of mindset shifts that I think deschooling can offer to us. It's not just doing something, but it's doing something that is genuine, that is genuinely of interest to you, not just you're choosing between options A, B, and C that a teacher gave. It was genuinely of interest. He talks as well about, where did I say it? This idea here, flee every place that drives you mad. You can stay and try to reform it, or you can vote with your feet. And later, if school helps you get good and be good, then good. If not, fly away. So I'll offer you that link just so that you can take a peek at it. It may speak to you, and it's all good either way. Mindy says she's a big Blake Bowles fan. Yes, me too. I'm just gonna copy that link in right there. Okay. All right. So before I turn off the recording and invite you to jump in, I'm just going to take a look at what the messages are that have come in. As parents of a neurodivergent teen, just having to manage the daily ups and downs of regulation at school allowed him to be actually interested. Yeah, so that's that whole piece of, it's the patience and it's the curiosity, like what's going to happen when we take school out of the mix? Like, who knows? And that's that kind of, let's see, that can really help, just that sense of curiosity and a bit suspending the need for it to be solved. And we can kind of see how things evolve for a given family. All right, so I'm going to turn off the recording and invite you to